Hello and welcome to World Now on TVC News. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected at the White House today to sign a deal with the U.S. President Donald Trump. The deal is to allow the United States access to the Eastern European nation's vast reserves of critical and rare earth mineral deposits. Ahead of the meeting, President Trump has apologized for calling the Ukrainian president a dictator. We have more details.
The United States and Ukraine are to begin negotiations on a reconstruction investment fund to determine how resources will be allocated after the deal is signed. The deal outlines a proposal for the U.S. and Ukraine to develop a plan to utilize future revenues from Ukraine's rare earth and critical minerals reserves, as well as its oil and gas sector. A reconstruction investment fund will be created. The aim is to use revenues generated from Ukraine's natural resources to reinvest into Ukraine for reconstruction, infrastructure and state-owned enterprises inclusive. Ukraine will contribute 50% of revenues from state-owned resources to the joint fund. The U.S. will also support Ukraine's efforts to secure lasting peace, but offer no direct security guarantees. President Trump had previously demanded a right to $500 billion in potential revenues from using Ukraine's natural resources to compensate for U.S. military aid and support to the country. But President Zelensky has been pushing back, arguing that actual U.S. aid to Ukraine is much less. According to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, which tracks military, financial and humanitarian aid to Ukraine since the war began, the United States has donated $114 billion to Ukraine. But the U.S. Department of Defense has a higher figure of about $183 billion, which includes the cost of replenishing Ukraine's defense stocks.
Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump announced he would impose new tariffs on Chinese goods, but the decision is not going down well with China. While announcing 24 hours ago that his proposed 25% tariffs on Mexican and Canadian goods would go ahead on the 4th of March, President Trump said an additional 10% duty would be imposed on Chinese imports. According to him, the new tariff would be imposed next month in response to the very high and unacceptable levels of fentanyl being smuggled into the U.S. Hitting back at Mr. Trump's decision, China's Ministry of Commerce says Chinese laws on drugs are among the strictest in the world, and the U.S. is only shifting blame and shirking responsibility. The ministry insists the imposition of unilateral tariffs violates World Trade Organization rules and undermines the multilateral trading system. A spokesperson of the Ministry of Commerce says if the U.S. insists on proceeding with this course of action, China will take all necessary countermeasures to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. The spokesperson, according to the Centers for Disease Control, more than 74,000 people died from synthetic opioid overdoses in the U.S. in 2023.
A WTO panel already ruled in 2022 that U.S. Section 232 tariffs violate international trade rules. Despite this, the U.S. has not only reinstated tariffs on steel and aluminum, but is now pushing forward with a new investigation. Such actions threaten the rules-based multilateral trading system and destabilize global supply chains. China is a net importer of refined copper, with only minimal exports of copper products. Accusations that China is undermining competition through subsidies and overcapacity are completely baseless. We urge the U.S. to immediately withdraw this investigation. Should the U.S. proceed with restrictive measures like tariffs, China will take all necessary steps to firmly defend its legitimate rights and interests.
Let's talk some more about President Trump and Zelensky talks, as well as the China tariff saga and other matters surrounding moves being made by the Trump administration. I'm being joined by Ambassador Joe Keshi, who is a former permanent secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nigeria. Good to have you join us, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right, so let's get your overall assessment of President Trump's policies 40 days into his second term in the White House.
Well, to start with, I think the first thing to say is that Trump made some of the promises that he's trying to execute during the campaign, and he was very clear and categorical about imposing taxes in order to achieve what he called a fair deal for the United States of America. And what that has caused is that because everybody is now familiar with Trump tactics, the rest of the world, particularly the major trading partners of the United States, they are also prepared. So it's like a tit for tat. If you impose sanctions on me, I would also retaliate by imposing sanctions on you. And this is what we are going to see for quite some time to come. Your report indicated, you spoke about drugs, going into the United States. I think that the United States itself should ask a very simple question that I also believe we should ask here when we publicly advertise the number of illegal drugs being seized in this country. The question is, how did they get into the country in the first instance? How did they get into the United States? And so that's one thing they have to look at. But on the whole, I just think that Trump is Trump. He's trying to be transactional, and that's exactly what they will discuss today. But the president of Ukraine has made it very clear that they need a guarantee if the deal is to work. And the deal is not going to be effective immediately. There's still a long way to go before it begins to, yield any result to both countries. But the truth of the matter is that the world is ready. The world understands Trump. And whatever policy he comes out in terms of his Americans' relations with the rest of the world, I think most countries are ready. The only sad thing is that the stability that was provided at the end of the Civil War, at the end of the World War, in which the world agreed to an international order that has lasted for over 70 years, is being disrupted. Now, whether it will survive Trump's 4 years and the next American president will find a way to restore that global stability, I think we just have to wait and see.
Let's talk about the meeting that would take place between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky. It should happen in about an hour. What really are your expectations? Do you see Donald Trump grant those security guarantees that Ukraine so dearly needs and desires at this time?
I think one good thing this morning or since last night is that Trump has, I don't know, but let me use the word, has changed his opinion. Remember that last week he was describing the president of Ukraine as a dictator. He's now walked back and is giving a more positive vibe. Again, just because they are going to make this deal. I think he wants to ensure that this deal comes through. And when you're going into a negotiation and you want to be successful, you don't have to antagonize your opponent. You do everything to present a positive front based on your national interest, and also ensure that your partner also gains from whatever deal that is on the table. So we just have to wait and see, because what Ukraine wants most from this meeting is a security guarantee that the peace accord with Russia will be fair to Ukraine, and that Ukraine will not lose most of its territory to Russia. That is all what Ukraine wants. Now, how that will be achieved, given the current situation on the ground, and given Trump's relationship with the president, with Putin, remains to be seen. But by this evening, we actually will know exactly the direction that the peace accord between Russia and Ukraine would go at the end of the day.
All right. And you do know that President Trump has said that it is actually in the place of the European Union to grant these guarantees. Do you see the EU stepping up in its responsibility and, just trying to be the bridge between these two countries, restore peace and grant these security guarantees?
The European Union has actually done more for Ukraine. They've done far more than the United States when you look at all the, assistance that has been provided to Ukraine. So they've done more. And I think this was why they were very upset when Trump began and was insisting that they would not be at the peace talks. But I think that has changed slightly. The likelihood is that they will be at the peace talks to help guarantee the security of Ukraine. Look, I think part of the problem, from what I can see, is that Trump returned to office, and without taking some time to understand the interplay of forces, currently on the ground. He just came with that boisterousness and determination that he's a dealer and that he's going to do things his own way. But I think he's beginning to realize that the Trump way might not work for him, as he thought it would. You cannot bully the global community into doing what they want to do. No, every country acts on its best interest. Ukraine is going to act on its best interest, and the Europeans are going to act in their best interest because they believe that the security of Ukraine is somehow also intertwined with the security of Europe itself.
All right, and talking about, security, just yesterday we're talking about the UK actually increasing its defense budget, and that implied cutting down aid, humanitarian aid, foreign aid from 0.5 to about 0.3%, about 6 billion, down there. And there were concerns as to what this would mean for UK, but it does appear the world, just like you mentioned, is panning toward Trump. It's a deal or no deal. What does this speak for the world?
Well, look, I don't know whether it's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of WTO, that reiterated what we've been saying for years. Africa actually do not need, at least most of the world indeed, particularly Africa, we do not need aid. We need a fair trading system. On the other hand, we also need to prepare ourselves in the sense that we need to have something that we can trade with the world. We cannot forever depend on anybody to give us aid or assistance. We must be able to do quite a number of things for ourselves as well. And I think that what Trump has done now is going to probably teach us a lesson and compel us, not just Nigeria, but a number of countries all over the world that have been dependent on aid, third world countries, that they have to take their own destinies into their own hands and not depend on the rest of the world to come to their aid. And to a large extent, look, come to think of it, when you look at the amount of money the Western world, the advanced countries are spending on aid, it's not as if they are not benefiting from it. They are benefiting from it as well. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes along the line, it also makes us very complacent in the fact that we are assured, we are guaranteed that, if we run into any challenges or difficulties, there are people who will come to our aid. But what we are being told today is that, look, yes, we'll probably still be ready to assist you, but you need to do more for yourself.
All right.
And on the other side of the story is that what most people do not know is that the United States also, by cutting aid to a number of countries, it's also going to lose, because for so many years, United States has used its soft power to gain a lot of advantages in the world. And if they continue the way they are continuing, they are going to lose that advantage that they've gained in the world.
Okay, let's now talk about tariffs. Donald Trump is actually promising to impose new sanctions on China, and it's to take effect next month. How do you see this impact, ties between these countries and overall in the world?
Look, it's very simple. China is not a small country. China is a global manufacturing capital of the world as of today. So it's not a country you can easily bully. So the Chinese have just announced themselves that, look, they are prepared to match Trump, percentage by percentage. So if he decides to impose 25%, the Chinese would also impose 25% on America. If he decides to do 10%, they would also do 10% on America. But somewhere along the line, because of what we have seen between what Trump has done between Mexico and Canada, I think that Trump will probably, relax a little bit and find a way of reaching an agreement with China. Quite a number of analysts have indicated that what Trump is trying to do is to use these bullying tactics as a negotiating, strategy. Now, maybe it will work at the end of the day, but the most important thing is that we need a fair trading system for everybody in the world, including those of us in the African continent. And so that's why we need to prepare ourselves. And when you look at what is happening in the rest of the world, almost every country that Trump wants to impose sanctions on, they also have the capacity and the capability to impose sanctions on America. So it's tit for tat. But the truth of the matter is that it's going to disrupt to some extent, the global world trade. But as I said earlier, somewhere along the line, as we have seen with Mexico and Canada, Trump would probably slow down, and then once they make a concession, these countries will come together and find a way of sorting out the problems.
All right, we'll see how it turns out, and especially that meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky later today. Ambassador Joe Keshi is former Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nigeria. Thank you so much for your time on World Now.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.
Well, let's take a break now. When we come back, there'll be more on World Now. Please.